Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the special meeting of the Select Board on November 19th, 2024 to order at 5 p.m. And I just want to give an explanation of what tonight's forum is and perhaps more importantly, what it is not. If you could put the sign down, thank you very much. So tonight we're calling a forum because the Select Board is at a decision-making point with regard to SouthCoast Wind, which is the next wind farm that is in the permitting process at Boehm. This is not a conversation about Vineyard Wind, the Good Neighbor Agreement, or anything else. The purpose here is to get the community's input on the choices that the board is facing imminently regarding our options related to the SouthCoast Wind permitting process. So just to be clear, if you start talking in public comment about Vineyard Wind or the Good Neighbor Agreement, I'm going to ask you to stop so we can stay focused on the matter at hand this evening. I'd like to introduce Will Cook from Cultural Heritage Partners. They are our legal counsel with regard to wind projects. And online we have Claire O'Brien and Greg Workhauser, who are also with the firm. So Will's going to walk us through where we are in the process, what decisions, and then of course what input we'd like to get from the community with regard to that process this evening. So I'm going to ask for everyone's cooperation in keeping this meeting in the scope of what is on the agenda, both because that's a requirement of open meeting law and because we have a specific purpose this evening. So with that said, Will, do you want to go ahead?
Thank you, Chairperson Moore and members of the Select Board. It's an honor to be here tonight and to meet with the community. As mentioned, my name is William Cook. I'm an attorney with Cultural Heritage Partners. I have practiced in the area of historic preservation law for close to 20 years as a private attorney and also as an academic, as a law professor. I've taught historic preservation law for a number of years. I also have previously had worked at the National Trust for Historic Preservation for about 8 years as Associate General Counsel, and first became involved in offshore wind permitting during the Cape Wind project. My work at the National Trust involved exclusively Section 106 and Section 110F of the National Historic Preservation Act, and also working with communities on local historic preservation ordinances. So appreciate the interest tonight. Claire, if you could please advance to the overview. So just to give everyone an agenda or an outline of what we'll be covering during my session and the public input session tonight, going to give you some brief project details just to help provide context and to show you how we got here by discussing not only the permitting project, but I want to give you a snapshot of the Section 106 law that brings us here tonight and that has brought the board to a decision point, which involves the mitigation proposal from BOEM, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, and SouthCoast Wind, and then to provide an opportunity for the Select Board to hear from the community about appropriate levels and ideas for mitigation. Next. So SouthCoast Wind is completely unrelated to Vineyard Wind. It's being developed by a wholly different developer named Ocean Winds. This is a partnership between a Portuguese corporation called EDP Renewables and ENGIE, which is a French company. Some of you may remember this project being called Mayflower Wind. It was renamed as SouthCoast Wind, but is the same lease area. This project will include up to 147 turbines, little over 1,000 feet tall, and this project is about 23 miles away from the closest point on Nantucket. Next. So I wanted to just provide, again, a little bit of an overview of what the town has been doing since 2021. These permitting reviews take some time. They are fairly compressed into about a 2-year time frame because of a special law at the federal level called FAST 41 that requires the federal government agencies to issue permits for large infrastructure projects in 2 years or less, which include offshore wind infrastructure projects. What has brought us here is this special type of environmental law known as the National Historic Preservation Act. This was the act or statute that was passed by the Congress in 1966 and that created the nation's historic preservation regulatory system. This is the same law that created the National Register of Historic Places and also includes a provision known as Section 110F of the National Historic Preservation Act, which applies to a special class of historic properties known as National Historic Landmarks. Nantucket is a National Historic Landmark, which includes all 3 islands of Nantucket, Tuckernutt, and Muskeget. These 3 islands comprise the Nantucket Historic District, which is recognized as a National Historic Landmark. The Section 110F project, which we're not here to discuss tonight, because it does not require the consultation between BOEM and the town, but just for, again, additional context, requires the lead permitting agency, in this case it's BOEM, to use all possible planning to minimize harm to National Historic Landmarks. In this case, that would be the Nantucket Historic District. This consultation takes place between BOEM as lead permitting or lead federal agency and the National Park Service, which oversees the National Historic Landmark process. And they are involved in this negotiation, such as it is, acting under a delegation of authority from the Secretary of the Interior. So that brings us back to Section 106. Section 106 was designed by Congress with regulations that were drafted by the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation that set up a sequential process that federal agencies are supposed to follow when deciding how to review economic development projects and how to balance them with historic preservation. It's important to note that Section 106 does not have any veto power. It is designed to be a consultation process. And at each step of the process, whether it's identification of historic properties that might be affected, what's called the area of potential effect, where there's a potential for these historic properties to be affected, whether there's a finding of adverse effect, and if there is a finding of adverse effect, what the federal agency is supposed to do about that in terms of avoidance of harm or adverse effects, or minimization of adverse effects, or mitigation of adverse effects. There is no single requirement. Any one of these choices is allowed under Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. And federal agencies who are leading the permitting review under Section 106 have a duty to consider the views of consulting parties. That does not mean that they have to honor a consulting party's objection. So a few key milestones. A process known as scoping, which is under the National Environmental Policy Act, began in December of 2021. That's where BOEM took a look at the broad range of environmental impacts that it planned to study in preparation of the final environmental impact statement, which was issued on November 8th of 2024. The town provided comments on the draft environmental impact statement that were focused on impacts on historic and cultural resources. As in terms of Section 106, The memorandum of agreement, which is the end of the Section 106 process, is anticipated to be executed on December 19th, 2024. And then the final step in the permitting review by BOEM is December 20th, 2024. And the name of that decision document is called the Record of Decision. The town has been the most outspoken of all consulting parties throughout this process. We've attended every single consulting party meeting that was set by BOEM, beginning in July of 2022, all the way up until October 8th, 2024. And consultation is ongoing, and we anticipate some future meetings. Next slide, please. Just to help everybody focus on the relevant finding under the National Historic Preservation Act that brings us here tonight, is that BOEM has determined, and we would agree, that the Nantucket Historic District, National Historic Landmark, will be adversely affected by the visual effects of SouthCoast wind. BOEM has proposed some measures to minimize adverse effects on the Nantucket Historic District. And I use the word minimize because that's the regulatory language. It's not mitigation, and I'll talk about mitigation in a moment. What BOEM has proposed to lessen adverse effects or to minimize adverse effects are non-reflective white or light gray paint on the wind project components and aircraft detection lighting systems to minimize nighttime visibility of the project. Those are the chief minimization measures that BOEM has proposed. In addition, as a way of resolving all adverse effects, and in this case, those adverse effects that can't be avoided or minimized, BOEM is requiring the lessee, in this case, SouthCoast Wind, to implement mitigation measures that are described, and we're not going to show you these long documents tonight, but they're available online on the town's offshore wind website, known as an Historic Properties Treatment Plan. And for those of you who've reviewed the Memorandum of Agreement, which is also a lengthy document on the town's website, it's there for you at Memorandum of Agreement Attachment 11. And I'll tell you now what BOEM has proposed as its mitigation offer to Nantucket. Next slide. So based on these findings, and in addition to the minimization measures that BOEM has proposed, BOEM has offered as adequate mitigation to offset 30 years of harm that will be caused by SouthCoast wind, two proposals. The first is what's called an historic property survey of historic neighborhoods along Nantucket's south coast, which the town has never asked for or requested, and I would say does not consider adequate to offset the adverse visual effects that South Coast will cause, and also an archaeological overview and assessment of the same neighborhoods, another proposed mitigation offer that has not been requested and is not needed and is not adequate. And to implement these mitigation measures, BOEM has offered $150,000 to implement these mitigation measures. So that is the mitigation offer that is on the table for the public to consider tonight, and also to consider what would be an appropriate alternative to BOEM's current offer. Next slide, please. Now we have passed out what we're calling a consultation decision tree. You'll see that the consultation process has lots of different decisions to be made. And we've done our best to use layman terms to help walk everyone through this process and to get us why we're here tonight. And I'll be there in just a moment. Early on at the beginning of the consultation process, the town secured its consulting party status which it was able to do because it's a local government with jurisdiction over historic properties that are listed in the National Register of Historic Places. Other parties have opportunities to participate as consulting parties if they have legal or economic interest in the undertaking in terms of adverse effects on the historic properties. The town obviously said yes to this so that it could participate and monitor the process. And through the process, the town filed extensive comments, objections, and attended meetings, consultation meetings that were scheduled by BOEM. To paraphrase what the town has already asked for, the town has requested that the turbines not be visible. They have requested, in light of the turbine failures through GE Vernova, a robust emergency response plan to address future turbine failures. They requested meaningful and adequate mitigation for the community that would offset South Coast's adverse visual effects over 30 years. And I'll just add, we've also asked that BOEM correct all deficiencies in the process and not move forward with the permitting process until the town's objections have been resolved. Next slide, or next portion of the decision tree. The blue diamond in the middle is where we are tonight and what brings us here. So as we've gone through this, 2-year permitting review process, BOEM is now at the point where it has prepared a memorandum of agreement, which is the decision document that terminates the Section 106 process. As I explained, it is offered to $150,000 in mitigation payments for these historic property and archaeological surveys. So there's some decisions to be made here tonight, and this is why the Select Board has called this meeting. If the answer is no, and the Select Board were to walk away, the town would be left with $150,000 in mitigation. And walking away would also waive any possibility of filing a lawsuit and appealing BOEM's decision on the basis of the inadequacy of the proposed mitigation. If you look down from the blue arrow, where we have a decision to say, yes, we're going to respond positively to BOEM's request for mitigation proposals, there's several options, and we've grouped these in broad categories. BOEM specifically has requested ideas for special projects that would be significant enough to offset the effects of South Coast wind. Another opportunity would be to seek additional contributions to the existing offshore wind community fund, or to request funding that could be made as a contribution to the town or to a new fund to fund these special projects so that the town, instead of BOEM or South Coast, could maintain oversight of the funding and to deploy the funding as adverse effects become known. In response to that response, BOEM could agree, in which case, and I'm sorry, there's a box that's cut off just on the screen. If BOEM agreed, which is unlikely, the mitigation requests would become orders in the permit or conditions that were ordered in the permit issued to South Coast and would become binding on the developer. If BOEM rejects, and if you look toward the northeast to the yellow arrow to the right of the blue diamond, BOEM could reject what the town has proposed and order its own mitigation, which could be the $150,000 in mitigation. It could be something else that BOEM decides. This brings us to another point on the decision tree. If the town were to walk away, the town would be left with what BOEM has decided for the town. There's also an opportunity to talk to the developer to negotiate for voluntary mitigation. That would be far more substantive and take you beyond what BOEM would ever reasonably offer. And then that would take the form of an agreement that would become enforceable in court against the wind developer. There's another option, and this is the final section of the decision tree. What happens if the town decides to appeal BOEM's decision or litigate? If you could please advance, thank you. So a couple options here, just to be very candid about how Section 106 litigation can turn out. So if the town were to decide to appeal BOEM's decision and propose mitigation, there are, again, a couple of options. A loss would mean bad precedent that could harm the town's position in future negotiations with other offshore wind farm companies. Litigation is time-consuming and expensive, and you're also left with what BOEM has ordered. On the other hand, a win, and I need to be clear about this, a win and an appeal of a Section 106 process does not stop a project from going forward. What happens when a party has a victory in a Section 106 or a NEPA lawsuit is the court remands the permit back to the permitting agency to redo the review. The important thing to know here, and I'm explaining this from years of review of appellate decisions, of appeals of 106 cases in the National Historic Preservation Act context, is that unfortunately, there's no guarantee of any different outcome. In fact, agencies might improve their reasoning to make their decision-making appear stronger to a court if a future appeal were to be filed. Also, the way our Administrative Procedure Act is set up in the United States that allows appeals of federal agency decisions, a court cannot order design changes, it cannot order specific forms of mitigation, and it cannot cancel the project. The only thing that can happen is that the agency has to start the process over with no guarantee of what that outcome could be. So I hope this context is helpful in framing the conversation tonight back to the blue diamond to take us to BOEM's request for mitigation proposals that the community would find to be adequate in terms of helping to offset SouthCoast's adverse visual effects that cannot and will not be avoided. Next slide. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Will. I'm going to ask the board if they have any clarifying questions that they want to ask on the process before I open for public input. Mike?
Sorry, if we go back to the screen, the prior screen. So there was I had two things I wrote down. Anyway, one was, is there a difference in this? We've got, if BOEM agrees to something, so that we've gone along here and they've agreed to it, or if we get the developer to agree to something, is there any difference between those two as in precedent or going forward in the future? Are they equal? Is one stronger than the other?
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm asking?
I do.
Yeah.
It's a good question. I mean, if BOEM were to give you everything you asked for, there'd be no need to have a conversation with the developer.
Yeah.
Where the conversation with the developer is needed is when the federal agency won't negotiate with the town to develop adequate measures to avoid, minimize, or mitigate harm.
Right. And what leverage do we have with the developer if BOEM doesn't give it to us? Like, why would they do that if, you know?
Yeah, so well, the leverage, such as it is the ability to appeal a federal agency's decision. And again, like the when means that a court remands the permit back to BOEM to redo the review. But what I have to say is, every project's different. There's no guarantee, and we saw this with Vineyard Wind, we've seen this in SouthCoast Wind, off Newport, Revolution Wind. The filing of appeal does not stay construction. It does not stop construction.
Right. And then one other question, have we set precedent with the prior decisions that we've made that impact this? Have we set up ourselves for positive or negative?
I would say they're positive because the contractual minimization measures that the town negotiated were unprecedented, and they weren't going to be ordered by BOEM. And so they became contractually enforceable guarantees. They've now become standard measures that BOEM is now requiring. We would argue that developers shouldn't be getting credit for the standard measures. But it was a helpful precedent, and it also helped establish the precedent for mitigation that is more meaningful by exponential multiples than what BOEM was offering. So I would say the prior precedent is helpful, but the thing to remember here is we're dealing with a different developer that so far has not been responsive to the town's concerns.
Right, I got you.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Oh, Matt.
And just one other, Will, is how does the cumulative impact, how does the cumulative impact of what's happening there influence what we're doing now? I mean, I think we all look out there and we realize it's different than we envisioned, and these are even larger. How do we, does that make it our case stronger to argue with BOEM? Does it make it weaker? Because we've got a cumulative impact that we.
So I haven't put up every objection and every aspect of every comment we've submitted to BOEM. Certainly front and center has been BOEM's failure to consider adequately the cumulative effects of all these projects. But that would be an issue that would be argued on appeal. But again, a federal court is not going to get into the nitty-gritty over like what's enough. I mean, there would be a decision the court would make about whether the federal agency, in this case BOEM, exercised the right amount of discretion. BOEM's argument and the Department of Justice's argument on appeal will be, we have thousands of pages of cumulative effects analysis. Now, we can argue doesn't make sense, isn't adequate, but that's what a federal court is facing that doesn't necessarily have the level of expertise and a command of a 250,000-page administrative record. So there tends to be a lot of agency deference, even though there have been some changes lately in case law that throw that into a bit of dispute. But that, regardless of what recent case law has, recent precedent involving a particular case known as Chevron, it's unclear how this will play out. And it's also unclear whether courts will completely disregard deference to federal agencies.
Thanks.
Okay. Board okay? Okay. So I'm going to try to summarize what we're hoping to get from all of you tonight. And that is, if you could, Claire, I'm sorry, could you throw the decision tree back up again? So we're in this blue box today. We've had a proposal that I heard a few gasps in the audience about that proposal. This board has been asked to respond to that proposal on behalf of this community. As Will pointed out, we could choose not to respond, and in my understanding, that limits our ability to appeal later. So I'd like to hear from the community whether you think we should respond or not. And then if we decide to respond, what are the ideas the community has that should this project continue forward as it appears to be headed, what is appropriate mitigation for the impact on our historic landmark? So let's be clear. We're not talking about species in the ocean. We're not talking about any of those things. Our purview as a board, our ability to comment or have influence on this process is limited to the impact on our historic landmark. So in that context, we really would like to hear from the community, what should we ask for from BOEM in this, assuming we're going to respond and make an ask that exceeds what they've offered? What specifically does the community want us to ask for? That's the task at hand tonight. I hope that's clear. And should anyone have any questions about the process along the way, we'll take questions as well as to this decision tree and the process. So how this is going to work is I have a bunch of hands up online. I have folks who want to speak here. I suggest you form lines on either side at the microphones. Our public comment is limited to 3 minutes. We'd like to give everybody an opportunity to speak. We will do our best to use the timer. We're different staff tonight, so we'll do our best. You will see a timer on the screen, whether you're in the room or not, which is a countdown clock for your 3 minutes. If the lines get long in the room, I'll be probably taking 2 in the room for every one I take online, because everybody online's at home in a comfortable chair and the people here are standing up. So that's sort of been my policy when we have a lot of comments. So I'm going to start.
So so I'm clear, are you breaking this into 2 questions for the public, or are you doing this all as one question? Are you asking, do we respond yes or no? And then you go to number 2, or are we going to combine the 2? What is your?
Well, in order for people not to have to come to the mic twice, what I ask is if you want us to respond, just say yes, respond, and here's what I want you to ask for, okay, is what I'm hoping to get. I hope that makes sense to everybody. And I'll start over here. And don't forget one other thing. Please don't have side conversations. It's very distracting to speakers, and it's very hard. All of that sound comes here. It's very distracting to the board. I think that was it. And state your name for the record. That was the other thing.
Sure, okay. Good evening. My name is Ted Giletti. I have two questions and a comment, observation. First off, was this a no-bid contract which the project sponsors were awarded? Or was this on a competitive basis? That's my first question. And second question is, why does walking away at this juncture waive our rights of further legal action? Those are my 2 questions. And one point for just observation, I find that the offer of the mitigation being proposed is basically gaslighting us. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Your first question is out of the scope of what we're addressing tonight. I don't think we're prepared to answer the licensing process of the federal government. I don't have any answers to that. We're here to talk about the 106. And then I don't know, Will, the second question, did you want to try to clarify that?
Yeah, the issue, I have to clarify, on the walking away issue, Greg, please feel free to jump in. Walking away and accepting BOEM's mitigation doesn't waive all appeal rights. It waives your ability to challenge the adequacy of the mitigation.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Did that make sense? I want to try to answer people's questions thoroughly.
Yes, it does, because in the preliminary explanation, it was not clear to me.
Okay.
But it's now clarified. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Okay, Veronica Bonet online.
Hello. I have, the thing of it is if we didn't understand exactly what Mr. Cook was saying, is there an opportunity to ask some clarifying questions? Because that's all I really wanted to do, and I have other comments later, but the answers to the clarifying questions I would need to ponder. And
Okay.
those questions are, could Mr. Cook explain the 110F versus 106 difference again, and the level of mitigation expected for those two things? And could he also explain what the level of adverse effect has been ruled on Nantucket? Is it minor, major, moderate? And also, because it's certainly related, what was the level of adverse effect for the other two projects that are already permitted?
Okay, thank you. Will, do you want to?
I don't have the final environmental impact statement. It's close to 1,000 pages with me to give you an answer to the level of adverse effect. Adverse effects have been identified. And in terms of Section 106, there's not a distinction between level of adverse effect. If there's an adverse effect, it has to be avoided, minimized, or mitigated. In terms of the first question, the difference between Section 106 and Section 110F, as I explained, is that, well, they're different processes. Section 106 requires identification of historic properties, assessment of adverse effects, and through consultation, finding ways to resolve adverse effects on all historic properties through avoidance, minimization, or mitigation. Any one of these is an appropriate outcome under Section 106. Section 110F, wholly different process, does not involve the town. It involves BOEM and the Secretary of the Interior. It's a different negotiation or consultation that BOEM leads that the statute requires all possible planning to minimize harm. There's not a mitigation component in Section 110F.
Thanks, Will.
I kind of had a follow-up on that for Will, but that's all right.
Okay, hang on. Val, go ahead.
Val Oliver, thank you. This is a real struggle to hear this because I feel like we've been here before. And so with every successive project that comes up, we're just going to hear, you're going to just have to suck it up and get some mitigation. And I am so struggling with that. If there isn't a more historic place on the planet than Nantucket, I don't know where it is. What I've seen publicly circulated lately is that there is a permit going to be issued on December 20th. And I can't see how any of our comments are going to even be heard since that's already been announced. And it's such a late date. I feel like this is lip service. It's become increasingly clear to me that the state and federal government officials think that's all we're worthy of. And now it seems like this is the position we're supposed to take as well. I don't believe anything we say or ask for will be considered since the damage was done with the agreement that covers the Vineyard Wind projects. There's already polls out there and that ruined everything. And now this is just more.
Val, can you keep it to SouthCoast, please?
But of course.
Thank you.
In my opinion, aside from pushing them out farther so we can't see them, there is no real mitigation. Sponsoring surveys of historic properties is just a slap in the head, like, oh, we'll catalog them because nobody's going to come see them anymore. These wind projects are a detriment to our island, and they will be irreconcilable and irreversible, and that will be on our decision makers. We bear the burden visually and environmentally, and we get none of the benefit of this energy except to pay higher energy rates. The overarching wisdom of these permitting agencies allow these projects to commence without a financial assurance. I hope SouthCoast has a financial assurance because Vineyard Wind doesn't. And we will be stuck taking them apart or looking at these metal dystopian wasteland poles out in the water, and money is not enough. There isn't enough money to make up for this. So I hope there's some way better suggestion.
Thanks, Val. Bruce Mandel online?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Uh, I'm listening to this and there's discussion of adverse effects, adverse impact issues. And there's one thing that seems to be missing from everything I've read. And, you know, these developments out at sea, eventually they fail, they stop working, they become obsolete, they become abandoned as they were in Hawaii and also on land in California. And I noticed that the decommissioning funding for this project has been waived by BOEM. And that's a problem. And it affects Nantucket in the future. There's no decommission plan set forth in the EIS, although there are mentions of a decommissioning plan to be provided in the future if needed. These projects, all of them, become obsolete and have to be rebladed. They have to be refigured. They have to be reset financially to get their benefits, their financial benefits back on track. So the question really is, and maybe Mr. Cook can answer this, what's the intent? Who pays to remove the above sea elements at the time that they need to be removed, the poles, the nacelles, the blades, the platforms, and the below sea elements, the poles that go down to the seabed, the cables that were installed that even run through Nantucket's own jurisdiction that was granted by the Concom. How will we remove those so that especially the undersea elements don't become navigational and fishing hazards in the future? Aside from the eyesore nature of rusting elements that need to be decommissioned, is there a way to push for the decommissioning funding to be required and for the decommissioning plans to be set forth now rather than some date in the near, the distant future, 30 years from now? I hope I'm making this point clear enough, and I'm hoping Mr. Cook can address that briefly.
Thank you, Bruce. Will, is decommissioning at all part of the 106, or have we included that in our comments?
We have requested, well, throughout the NEPA and 106 process, decommissioning is a requirement that BOEM, is part of the regulatory process. There was a delay in the decommissioning bonding for Vineyard Wind. In terms of SouthCoast Wind, the type of problem you're speaking about, I think could also be reframed potentially as a mitigation proposal. If there are concerns about future turbine blade removal or failures, that's the type of mitigation proposal that we're here tonight to discuss. So I think it's a very reasonable idea.
Okay, great. So Bruce, I think the answer to that question is we would include it in this mitigation, the response to BOEM, perhaps in the form of making sure a fund is set up for decommissioning as a mitigation proposal. Mary?
Mary Chalk. I vote no, walk away. The attorney, I didn't hear anything really definitive. I heard there's no guarantee of success or limited ability, but nothing, there's still a possibility. And as long as there's that possibility to stop this, I vote walk away. Over the last few days, walking on Nantucket Beach, I am picking up debris, blade debris, new blade debris every day. Some curious styrofoam pieces. I don't think that is really compatible with a historic landmark to have this garbage washing up on our beach. I reported it on X, where some news agencies picked it up. But other than that, there's been no monitoring of the impacts that are washing ashore, or how much blade is still in the ocean, or what they retrieve. So the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior with these developers. So the board and attorney sounds intent on moving forward, placing Nantucketers in harm's way for this project. And so therefore, my ask would be for mitigations, Mary Chalk should not be burdened with reporting what's coming up on the beaches, that we have continuous, regular monitoring by independent groups, because the town's not independent, they're getting money. So by independent groups, and to also hire scientists to interpret the evidence. This is important evidence 4 months later. Interpret the evidence and report promptly to the public the status of the impacts we're being subjected to. Also, I would ask the medical community to urgently engage in baseline studies of human health, because, as Matt says, a cumulative impact of the numbers of these turbines with the constant shedding of the leading edge erosion of the microplastics into our water, or the lights flashing on us all day long, and the noise. I mean, this is multiple turbines. We should be taking those baseline studies, independent groups doing this, independent, regular studies of human health that we are being subjected, those that are being subjected to with these projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Online, Andrew Jacobson.
Sorry, I have to unmute. Thank you. Thank you. So Andrew Jacobson, live in Cisco. First of all, let me just say that I agree with the recent comments about independent monitoring. If you were to move forward, I think those are excellent suggestions about seeking as mitigation, the monitoring, the decommissioning funds, the scientific monitoring of the effect on the sound, on human health. But in general, when you see these overscale projects where the project itself has such adverse effects, it seems like it would be very normal for for the representative body to request a scaling back as part of the mitigation, a significant scaling back, and maybe even a kind of a relocation of some of the proposed installations. Why isn't that part of mitigation? Or I mean, if you're going to move forward with this, and of course you could appeal if they didn't agree to that.
We are taking suggestions, so thank you.
And we've kind of done that by saying, get them out of our view shed, because they only have X amount of space, so they would have to scale back, but I think asking more directly may make sense.
No, I think we can ask specifically to reduce them. I mean, I'll say that I see them in the view shed. I see the flashing all night. The visibility in these proposed structures are even larger. I think if you were to move forward and we were to be less meek and less accommodating, it would be very appropriate to request that the structures were smaller and more remote, because just the density and the size of the structures, contributes to all of the problems. Again, we are where we are, but it contributes to all of the myriad problems. And again, I strongly agree with the other suggestions that if you were to move forward, the independent monitoring, the decommissioning, the health effects, all of those things should be funded and surveilled by an independent scientific body.
Okay, thank you very much. Ellen?
Yes, what I don't understand is BOEM the only management agency that is overseeing this entire project? Where's the EPA? I mean, we talk about the 150,000. That's a joke, okay? That's where I'm coming from. That is really, like somebody called it, gaslighting. It's a joke. Come on, 150? Now, the night sky is already ruined. This summer I was out in Nantucket at a beautiful friend's house, and looking out at the sky, there are all the red lights blinking and blinking. That's only one group. There's going to be like 2,400 windmills out there. Now, we're told we can only discuss this tonight. What I'd really like to know is what about getting the EPA involved? What about other federal agencies Boehm seems to just want to shove this through, and their only thing is on our historic. And I'm sure that if you go up to the church, there's areas where you could go and you'd see those red lights up there. Okay, you're going to see them, and there's not many of them now. But we're expecting 6 farms, right? 5 or 6 different groups that want to. What is there going to be? 2,500 windmills out there? And I want to know the impact of the environment. And I guess we're not supposed to discuss that tonight. But the noise, that's another thing that was just brought up. What's that going to be like? I bet you everybody will hear it on Nantucket if we've got 2,400 windmills out there making noise. And I really want to know when we're going to be able to discuss the entire project. Like I said, I don't know what everybody else thinks, but $150,000, really? This company is probably backed by oil companies. That's what most of them are. If you follow the money, it's all oil. And I don't think that we're one big experiment out here. And I've said that before. We're an experiment. Who's going to clean this up if there's a hurricane? Our beaches could be ruined. This went all over the East Coast. And I want to know when we're going to discuss the environmental impacts of this project, because this mitigation thing at $150,000, this is jokeable. I don't know how much we'd have to discuss that. I don't know what you should agree to. It's priceless what we're talking here, but we're talking about, yes, the lights, that impact, but the environmental impact. I've got grandchildren here. I hope they'll be able to go out on those beaches. But right now, because the CEO of another company, Vineyard Wind, says that their things are non-toxic, like their styrofoam that they build them out of, and the fiberglass. I'm
Ellen?
off subject. Yes, I'd like to know when we can discuss the environmental impact. This town should be worried about that because we're a tourist industry. If those things keep breaking and falling off, I want to know that they've got something they can do immediately out there, not have them sink and not have them come all over the United States. They might have even hit Canada, pieces of this stuff. She's still picking it up. This should have been like an airplane crash. That blade should have been taken to a building and laid out in every piece as much as they could find. But seems to me this town was the ones cleaning up more than they were. So this whole first scenario didn't go very well. So I really want to know when we're going to discuss this and why the EPA, environmental protection, I guess we're really not environmentally protected if they're going to let this big experiment, which we've
Thank
just
you,
gone
Ellen.
through with another wind company. Now we're going to do it again.
Ellen, thank you. Okay. So what I heard is that we should include in our requests for mitigation some measures for debris response, improved debris response at the very least, and that is on the list. So,
Whatever other federal
Ellen?
organizations there are that protect the environment, that's not being looked at all with this.
I'm not going to go back and forth on that. The process is the process. We're here tonight because we have a window into the process. That's what we're here to focus on tonight. I know it's frustrating. I know it doesn't feel adequate, but this is the process. I wish I could rewrite it myself. Malcolm?
Madam Chair, maybe he's going to respond about the environmental, because there is environmental, it may not be great, but there is environmental oversee, correct?
Yeah.
So BOEM, just to clarify, BOEM is the lead federal agency. It oversees the permitting process. The EPA, the Army Corps, Fish and Wildlife Service, a whole host of other federal agencies are involved in this process, contributing to the compilation of the environmental impact statement. They are not involved in the Section 106 process. BOEM is in charge in running the Section 106 process. Just to be clear, the $150,000, which we agree is not adequate, this is a proposal from BOEM to resolve adverse visual effects. It has nothing to do with other environmental effects.
Okay, thanks, Will. I know it's unfortunate, right? Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Heather Avison. I'm probably a little behind the game here. Can we clarify what the historic, is all of Nantucket considered the historic district? Or if I have a house on Western Ave that's not historic versus the hostel, that is historic? Is there a difference there, or are we talking about all of Nantucket?
The entirety of Nantucket is a designated federal historic landmark.
Okay.
So the
thank you.
impact we're talking about is on the entire island.
Okay,
Including
And Tuckernuck and Muskegon.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
And I would say that we do need to respond.
Okay. Any suggestions?
Not yet.
Okay. Online, Maureen Phillips.
Okay, there we are. Yes, thank you. I'm speaking from a point of some experience with this as I live in Nantucket, and several years ago, I think as many as 6 years ago, the then Nantucket Residents Association, we made the first comment to BOEM about wanting to have the ALDS, that's the lighting system that will not be going on once these things are built, because we recognize that obviously Nantucket was going to have the biggest visual impact. So that has been before the various entities for quite a while. It's also my impression at this point that we are going to be able to make that happen, and that should, if that needs to be part of any mitigation or betterment of what's going to happen. But people need the lights have to be on while these things are being built. And so if we didn't have this ADLS system, that's what we would see all the time. And we used to have the FAA tower out here, and I used to see red blinking lights 24/7. So it'll be good not to have those. And I think that's an issue that has been pretty much addressed. I think we have to go forward. I think walking away would be giving up any possibility of getting even what we were able to get from Vineyard Wind. I was also on the working group which negotiated, and with the help of Will and others in his law firm, the agreement with Vineyard Wind. Now, what's important for me to think about is that, unfortunately, the way all this is structured and there's no way to go back and somehow undo this, is that there is no requirement. There's no line on a map that says you can't build them any closer than this. There's no requirement to address, definitively. It's not a requirement. It's all like, well, maybe it will get done or what have you. So I think we really, really need to push hard on the mitigation issues and focus on those, because we did get an agreement from Vineyard Wind. I know lots of people are not in love with it, but we are giving grants to island entities getting solar projects.
Maureen,
Yes.
your 3 minutes are up.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks very much.
I'm Janet Sherland. I live on Tom Nevers Road, looking on the ocean side, looking out. And, in my opinion, certainly we are ruining Nantucket with these wind projects. It's taking a National Historic District and a natural environment. And I now look out and feel like I'm looking at an oil field by day and a runway by night. Those red lights are on every night. They've been on every night for a year. So mitigation ideas that I would have would be to make sure that in any future projects, they cannot build those turbines within view of the island. Now, I don't know how far out you would have to go. It's shocking what's there and what's visible from the naked eye at all times of day and night. Now, when I'm looking at the sunset every night, I'm looking at a field of turbines in there. But so how far out would they have to go? I realize that's more expensive for them to have to go back and get supplies and refuel, but I don't care. They're ruining this beautiful, pristine island that we're all on for its natural beauty and views. And so I'd say mitigating how close turbines can be. They really should be completely out of sight of the island. And also some real law about those blinking red lights. Now, we hear that there's been some agreement with Vineyard Wind and they're not supposed to be, and they will be turned off eventually. I don't believe that anymore. I've been looking at them for a year. I would say whatever the method is for that, and the next time, we can't suffer through them for a year or two while they're fixing things. They should be off if that's the way they're going to work, or there should be a different technology. That technology is not working right now. And I'm afraid that the longer we don't protest it, the more they're just going to get used to it being on. And also, I think very much we need to require the environmental studies that people have talked about, and further, anything for decommissioning. There should be big funds for decommissioning, because hopefully they will be decommissioned at some point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Will, Greg, did you want to add something?
Just to respond to the question of how far out do turbines have to be before they are invisible, the answer is somewhat dependent on conditions on any given day, but on a clear day, the science has shown that turbines can be visible up to 40 miles from shore. Beyond 40 miles, no matter how tall they are, they're over the curvature view of the Earth and become invisible. The second thing I'd point out is that, unfortunately, the US Congress basically approved the lease areas for offshore wind off the Atlantic coast about a dozen years ago. And the window for litigating based on the approval of where you can bid, and if you win a bid, if you're a developer, construct an offshore wind farm, those territories were set 10 to 14 years ago. So the question that the states and the federal government and the developers are faced with is the tension between how many turbines can you fit within a lease area to generate the amount of power that the states are buying or promising to buy from those offshore wind farms. And because of federal regulations, you can only put turbines at a distance of 1 mile from each other. So if you have a limited geographic area set by Congress, and you have a mile required distance between each turbine, the math becomes pretty easy to do in terms of how many turbines you need to generate a minimum amount of power. We can, per the comments of an earlier commenter this evening, and have asked for the reduction and the removal of turbines, especially the most visible ones. But just as a reality check, that comes up against the reality that if you were to remove all visible turbines from these projects that are on BOEM's consideration right now, then you would have to eliminate the projects entirely, because the vast majority of turbines are being built within that 40-mile distance. I hope that's helpful.
Thanks, Greg. Dorothy Stover online.
Couple of questions.
Hang on, John. Someone online is going to speak now.
Dorothy Stover here. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead, Dorothy.
Thanks. Mr. Cook, I have a question for you. I can hear the frustration in your voice, and clearly preservation is a love of yours. And everyone here seems to not want the wind farm and is frustrated. It's unfortunate we are here. My question for you, Mr. Cook, is we know that over a decade ago, wind farms seemed like very promising for clean energy. But now we know that they are not clean energy, and 40% of wind turbines fail. Bruce mentioned about wind farms being abandoned throughout the United States. Do any of these options support us getting the most as we possibly could, while perhaps delaying the project going forward, as the powers that be hopefully change the idea of wind farms in the US waters?
So, Dorothy, if I'm understanding your question, do we have a path that would help delay the project in the hopes that policy changes?
Right.
Okay. I think Will answered that question already, which is that any appeals or litigation that the town engages in does not change the timeline or the course of permitting for South Coast Wind. So
Okay.
the practice is that this would move forward while any appeal from the town of Nantucket was going on. Have I got that right, Will? Oh, he's going to add a little bit more.
Yes, and just also to clarify, Ms. Stover, I think it's an excellent question about the turbine blade failure. We've also repeatedly, on behalf of the town, been asking for BOEM and the South Coast project to figure out what to do about these future turbine failures, so that in the event of future turbine failures, there'll be a more robust emergency response plan. We'd certainly prefer not to see any future turbine failures, but that has been a delay to get that resolved has been something that the town has requested, but that BOEM has ignored.
John? Go ahead, John.
Yeah, thank you.
Just identify yourself for the record, please.
Excuse me?
Just state your full name for the record, please.
John Tiffany. Just moved back from California. Been away for 5 years. Unfortunately. One question I think I heard, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I heard that there is no way at this stage that we can prevent this from happening. Is that correct?
I'm going to let the lawyer answer that question.
The National Environmental Policy Act and the National Historic Preservation Act do not provide any veto power. The goal is to balance, such as BOEM is balancing, the sometimes competing goals of development and historic preservation. So those laws are not set up to stop development. And when those laws are reviewed on appeal, the remedy is for a court to order an agency to redo the process and look at the balancing again, but it doesn't guarantee an outcome.
I think the answer was no.
Yes.
I think the issue that I want to bring up is that the agencies can do anything they want, but they report to somebody. Okay? They report to somebody. They report to the legislatures, and they report to the President of the United States. And so when someone says there is nothing we can do to stop this, I don't believe it. I just don't believe it. Now, maybe everybody in this room wants this to happen. Boy, you could fool me right now. I'm going to digress if you don't mind.
Oh, we'd like to.
Libby, was it 7 years ago we looked at the Nantucket turbine or something like that?
So John, we're
Maybe
here.
longer.
All right. All I know is that at the time I did a fairly detailed study, talked to people all over the world who've been using it. And we came up with a final number which says that turbines are going to be more expensive than conventional electricity.
Yeah.
They're just going to be.
John, our purview tonight is not wind energy policy or the financial viability of wind energy.
Yeah.
It's about this permitting process. So I'm going to try to keep us on track.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. My only point is I can't believe that that we just can't do anything at this stage.
Okay.
Just can't believe it. But we have to want to do it. And if the Board of Selectmen doesn't want to do it, then so be it. I got a feeling that a lot of the people here that I've talked to since I've been back would really like to reconsider.
Okay. Okay. Burton Balkine online. Oh, Don. did you want to say something?
I just wanted to say, I think that we would all like them to really reconsider this. But again, that's not our purview tonight. That being said, I mean, there may be a window, and we have been and will be discussing that because there was a major administration change federally. But we are also part of Massachusetts, and our governor very, very highly supports wind energy. So,
Okay, we're not having that conversation, please.
I just wanted to recognize.
No comments from the audience. Okay, thank you.
This has been a major policy from elsewhere.
So, okay, Spruce?
Burton Balkind, I would say yes to staying engaged in the process. And I find it a little disingenuous of all the people that are saying we need to disengage when our downtown is flooding on sunny days and we have an obvious climate crisis going on with the recording some of the hottest temperatures in modern times, and it's not going away. It's getting worse, not better. And I don't know if this is the solution, but it's also part of a bigger solution that we're trying to solve. And I think walking away sends a wrong message to the BOEM and to the people of our country, saying that we don't want to be involved in this. And I understand a lot of people have a lot of problems with what's going on, and I hear them. I love the ocean. I'm a member of an organization that protects the beaches here on the island. I'm very sensitive to that. But just saying no and throwing the baby out with the bathwater doesn't seem like it's a smart way to go forward. And I think at this meeting, we've heard from audience members some good mitigation ideas, like Bruce Mandel's idea of making sure there's money available for decommissioning and making sure that blade failures are reported. I think the board is very sensitive to a lot of the issues that have been brought up, and that they're not going to let it fall through the cracks. And as much as this has been a little bit of a boondoggle, I think the big picture of climate change, and we're on a small island that is eroding. And the solution is not to just build walls around the island to protect it. I think we have to have a lot of solutions. And I think this is part of that toolkit. And so I would say, please stay involved in the process. And I hope the select board would do everything in their power to protect the island. And I think that's what they want to do. And I think, like all of us, we've all been in uncharted territory, and we're trying to kind of figure this out as we go along. And I hope the people on the island would follow that along. And not everyone is against this project. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Burton. Okay.
Hi, I'm Evie O'Connor, and my answer to the question is no. And the reason for that being is that the current Good Neighbor agreement made with the Vineyard Wind Consortium of 5 offshore wind projects has not proved to be successful in positioning Nantucket in a way to mitigate the harm or protect Nantucket's historic landmark status as the projects continue. So the most overt evidence of this was the lack of appropriate cleanup and reparation from the blade failure in July, and Vineyard Wind's breach in the Good Neighbor agreement regarding—
Evie, we're not really talking about Vineyard Wind tonight. We're talking about SouthCoast.
I guess to me it feels related because that Good Neighbor agreement would be a precedent in agreements of how the town is relating to offshore wind. But
The decision before us tonight is whether to respond to BOEM's mitigation offer, and if so, what should we ask for mitigation? That's the step we're at right now. We're not negotiating with the wind farm. We're responding to a BOEM request and getting public input. Is that clear to folks?
yes, that's clear. Okay, so my response would be to walk away because the precedent of the very recent agreement did not prove successful at protecting the town's historic landmark status, which you're very clearly asking, how can we move forward in a way? So I feel like it's important to stay on topic, but we can't just like disregard the context in which this is all happening, because everything is contextual. This doesn't exist in a vacuum.
This is not a negotiation of a community benefit agreement. It's a response to the federal government.
Right. Okay, so I'm just looking at my time.
Yeah, I'll give you a little grace because I interrupted you.
Yeah,
so.
that's okay. It doesn't seem like the mitigation proposal positions Nantucket in a way to protect Nantucket's historic landmark status. And so therefore, I think the exchange of money further limits Nantucket as a town to protect the view shed and the dark skies that we are already seeing being interrupted by what is currently 5%. The current wind turbines are 5% of what's being proposed. So,
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's helpful. Thank you. Veronica, I'm skipping over you to give others online an opportunity to speak for the first time. So you can keep your hand up, but I'm going to keep an eye on giving others an opportunity first. Amy DeCibio online?
Hi, good evening. First of all, I'm wondering if maybe Mr. Cook didn't understand the question. Actually, Veronica asked it earlier, because I would be surprised that as the lawyer who's handled the prior projects, that he wouldn't know what the levels of the adverse effects from the prior projects were. But just to clarify for Veronica and anyone else out there, that the New England winds, for example's adverse effects are major, and the South Coast winds are moderate. But I guess where we started in earlier projects, I believe in the same, BOEM it offered pretty much the same type of mitigations, ADLS, a white paint, and a number that was something around $150,000. I don't really remember what it was. But I would suggest whichever fork in the road that we take, it is one that does not put us in a situation where we are negotiating with the developer directly again, because all we have to do is take a look off the beaches and see where that's gotten us. I would say that the visual impacts here are, and of course, what Mr. Cook said is right, there is no veto power here, but nobody has veto power on any of these things, maybe the president. But really, Mr. Tiffany spoke correctly. There is a path forward here. The visual impacts are part of the story, but not the whole story. We should be including the environmental issues to both the ocean and to Nantucket and to our harbors. And we should be considering the economic impacts on the town. We have a tourist economy. We have businesses, we have property values, and clearly things like blade breaks really hurt us as much as the visual impacts. So what we should be doing is picking a path that puts us in a situation where we can sue the government agencies, perhaps in partnership with other entities. This is what Cape May, New Jersey did, and they were rather successful with it. After 2 weeks after they filed their lawsuit, BOEM, the Ørsted packed up there and paid $150 million or $130 million to walk away. So I just think that whatever path we choose should be one that puts us in a position where Nantucket can stand up for itself. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Who's that? Yep. Greg, did you want to?
Just one confirming point for Ms. DeCibio. The heritage tourism-based economy of Nantucket is an adverse impact for which the town can seek appropriate mitigation and has sought and will continue to seek appropriate mitigation. That's not something that's excluded from this conversation. It has long been at the center of the conversation.
Thanks, Ray.
Hi, Llewellyn Bartholomew.
Just pull the mic down. There you go.
Hi, Llewellyn Bartholomew. I was not planning on speaking, but one of the things that I think we need to do is to reclaim our seat at the table of common sense, okay? There has been a push for the environment, which since the 70s I've been supporting. okay? More so than most of the young kids out there. But we have to do it smart. Perfect example, the government offered the auto industry incentive to build electric cars, okay? As a result of that, nobody bought those cars because we didn't put in the infrastructure of having charging stations. As a result of that, thousands of workers were laid off. Common sense. Common sense, we are a historic tourist destination. Before they began to build the windmills, I sat down at Nantucket Beach and I watched this woman sit there for 1 solid hour staring out at the pristine ocean. It was gorgeous. It was unobstructed and your mind could go on forever. We see now, we were fortunate this summer that for the most part, there was a haze over the horizon and people didn't see it. But when they begin to see these windmills there, are they going to choose to come to Nantucket to look at industrialization? People sit there and say, well, you just don't want them in your backyard. That's not true. They have a place. You don't notice the windmills that are built where man has already created or put his signature on the environment, okay? But when you put them out in the ocean, which used to be pristine, belong only to nature, it's an interruption. I think you also have to sit there, common sense. Look at what Ireland has done. They've taken down their windmills. They're not working. Nebraska has taken down its windmills. They're not working. I'm all for them, okay? I'm all for alternative energy, but let's do it right. Let's stop pushing these projects forward and say, well, we have to accept them. The last thing that I want to say is that I'm tired of being threatened by these companies that this is what I'm going to offer you and accept it, or else I'm going to sue you. And I'll close by saying, take a look at the residue that has been left over by the telephone companies, all those green things with the
Okay,
waters coming out.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Ellen, I'm letting everyone speak once, so you may as well sit down. We got a ways to go. Everybody's going to speak once. Yeah, we'll give you another term when everyone's had a chance. Cliff Carroll online?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Couple of things. First, and I'm going to try not to repeat any messages or earlier points, but in reference to the distance and the lights, I have another home in West Farnsville and on Cape Cod, and I literally can see the Vineyard Wind turbines over 40 miles away, as clear as bell, Bear Ride. I think there's 27 of them right now. So when you look at the height of the proposed project for SouthCoast and you consider the distance that you can actually see them, it is going to be devastating to the south side of Nantucket. They have talked about shutting the lights off upon completion. I think we have to really tighten that language up if there is an agreement, because these things are going to be being built for 2 to 3 years at this pace. I have a question for Attorney Cook, and I'll if you could please ask afterwards, but does the 106 historic presentation take into consideration oil damage to historic properties? You have offshore oil transformer platforms that are out there. The federal government has already done oil spill fatality charts that show the oil reaching the shores of Nantucket and in turn historic properties. I'm sure hundreds of historic properties. Has the effect of a potential oil spill been taken into consideration on that effect on the historic properties? Bonding, which Bruce brought up earlier, I think Mr. Cook indicated that the government delayed it. Well, the delay is 15 years of the first 15 years of construction. I think that if we have any say in the matter, that there should be a clause stating that in the event that the federal government goes to waive bonding again, that the developer should have to replace it with actual bonds naming Nantucket as the sole and direct payee of those policies. And last of all, during our earlier hearings on Vineyard Wind, and I know we're not talking about Vineyard Wind, but BSEE, who is controlling this process on the cleanups, they stated that they had the right to reinstate the bonds on that particular project. From what I understand, yes, go ahead, I'm sorry.
How does this relate to South Coast, Mr. Carroll?
Because what needs to happen is we need to have language that states that the bonding will not be released in any event. And if it is, that the a direct bond to the island of Nantucket would in fact be put in place to replace that. And in reference to the debris that is still showing up on the island, from what I understand, and this goes to the issue of, again, bonding for the removal of projects. From what I understand, a large chunk
Mr.
of
Carroll?
that blade is still in the
Mr. Carroll?
ocean. Yes.
Mr. Carroll, we're not
Yes.
talking about Vineyard Wind, but I do agree with you that
no,
debris response planning is critical.
I
part of the
understand that. I
mitigation.
just wanted to
Thank
make
you.
a relate.
Thanks.
This is
Thanks, Mr. Carroll. Will, did you want to respond
Sure,
to the
just
question
to
about oil?
briefly clarify, it's a very good question. We would take issue with the adequacy of BOEM's response, but BOEM has taken the position that has addressed things like blade failure throughout the environmental impact statement. They use the term accidental releases. Section 2.3 in particular in the EIS considers it a low probability event. I think something we'd all take issue with too, as well as other structural failures. So I did want to let you know BOEM says that it considers them. We certainly take issue with the adequacy of the consideration.
Thanks, Will. Toby?
Thank you, Brooke. I wanted to
Just state your full name.
Oh, Tobias Glidden,
Thank
also
you.
known as Toby. I wanted to just echo the woman earlier talking about common sense in regard to this project, South Coast. And from the last project, there was a lot of discussion about the number of turbines. It went from like 106 to, in the mid 60s, and the turbines got bigger. And so that's an element of the mitigation that happened. So in this project south of the island, I think it's in some ways smaller turbines are lower, but there's more of them. Bigger turbines, there's less of them, but they're taller. And so there's pros and cons to both of them. I personally think like less of them is more valuable or more useful, less impactful. Also, I think in the process, we should focus on like what our priorities are through the mitigation process instead of just asking for 1,000 different pieces of mitigation. Be like, well, what are our top priorities that we want to advocate for? I think that's very important. And lastly, I will say, some of the turbines, or lastly, I want to say, I think the town, in some respects, did a good job in negotiating the good neighbor agreement, considering what we're being offered with these other projects. We did get something versus nothing. And in the context of BOEM, project 522, the one furthest to the south, that product the town already received some mitigation from through its good neighbor agreement. And so I think there's a good argument to say to BOEM, like, hey, we negotiated for a project that was even further away than this project, distance-wise, and equal size, and we received, these, mitigation. And so I think that's proportional, and so I would encourage the town to be like proportional in their negotiations going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Toby. Online, Madeline Hay?
Hi, can you hear me?
Barely. Just speak right into your mic, please.
Okay. Madeline Hay here. So I'm completely opposed to this proceeding with South Coast Wind. it's really hard to know what the right way to move forward is with all of the political jargon that seems to want to sway us towards the option of sitting back and not doing anything about these projects. I speak on behalf of about 2,000 and counting people, as well as about 150 businesses on island that do not want any further wind turbines to be erected off of our shores. There is no good that will come from them, as most of the people that have spoken before me tonight have said. There's no benefit in these wind turbines being erected. It's only going to cause problems. I'd like to just commend all the people that spoke tonight. It's incredibly brave and incredibly honorable that you're standing up for the island. And whatever, to Amy DeCibio's point, whatever way the town needs to proceed in order to make sure that we have the highest leverage in fighting offshore industrialization, that would be the best way to proceed. There's just this is a colossal. It's going to be a colossal failure. Unfortunately, the precedent has been set by the previous products and the previous projects. And I'd also like to say that you cannot silo this conversation to only be about South Coast wind, because Vineyard Wind completely plays into what's occurring with South Coast, because the fact that our horizon line is now destroyed means that it's going to be that much easier for these wind turbines to continue to be erected. So, you can't have these discussions and take that part of the equation out. All wind turbines count as a part of this conversation. It has to be holistic. We cannot segment these conversations in town meetings like this. And you also need to give people more than 3 minutes to talk, at least 5 minutes. The man who you cut off earlier hadn't even finished his sentence. So there just has to be a really different way to proceed with these conversations with the community and with the board. So my vote is no. It's not going to benefit us at all. Thank you.
Thanks, Madeline. Joanna?
Hi, Joanna Roach. A couple things. One is I have a question about I have two questions. One is about the memorandum of agreement, which is supposed to be signed by consulting parties if they wish to have it signed by the 13th. So how does this negotiation play into that memorandum of agreement? That would be my first question. And then I think the second question or suggestion would be if we could get one of the decision trees around how to best work on influencing BOEM, that would be, I think, super helpful in terms of clarifying it for the audience. In general, I think that, BOEM has failed to really consider the aggregate of these projects. And I think there is not a mitigation plan that compensates us for the loss of the viewshed, the impact of property values, or the loss of the dark skies. And so any suggestions that I would have with regard to mitigation are really largely around, one, the decommissioning, which several other people have mentioned. I think two is the lighting locations on the actual wind turbines, because if we can speak for a minute about minimizing the impact in the viewshed. If you look at where South Coast is putting their first several windmills, you can see there's a 23-mile mark, then something happens at the 26-mile mark. And what I've heard from South Coast is that because of the Earth's curvature, and we're looking into this as well to confirm this, that the view will drop off at about 30 miles. And so their mid-mast lighting happens at about 85 meters. And at that point, if we could try to see if they could push everything back to the 30-mile mark, we may not be as impacted by the lighting on the wind turbines. So I think that would be something to bring to them. I think the other suggestion that I would have would be for us to be able to install light meters on a few of the wind turbines that are closest to Nantucket, so we can start to establish what the impact of those lights actually are on the sky and gather data. Because I think in terms of being able to make decisions, we need data. And I think that with regard to mitigation and minimization and avoidance, I think it would be really good if we could look at ways in which we can convince BOEM to look at the aggregate impact of these projects. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanna. John Walker online. John, I'm not sure what happened. I'm not seeing you. If you can log back in, I'll scoot you to the top of the list. Charlotte Duhamel?
Hey, everybody. I think it's important to take a step back and see that we're no longer in a position of weakness. The tide has turned. Everyone can see it. The Trump administration, whether you like it or not, is bringing a sea change, not only to this industry, but to how the negotiation works. We're going to have a new head of the Interior. There's going to be different agencies that will no longer be answering to the current administration. In addition to that, if you're talking about mitigation, and I know this is, not what you're looking for input necessarily, but the mitigation is against partners like NG. I'm sure you guys know that they have been accused and convicted of all sorts of problematic behavior, land grabbing, forest cutting, river pollution, insider trading. So you have to think about who these actors are, who are the partners, can you trust them? And if the answer is no, and you cannot go into negotiations with them. If you can delay these negotiations, that's some of the greatest power that you have, because with the way that the market is looking right now, how the companies are losing money every day that there's a delay. A guy I talked to, at Ørsted was saying every delay costs them so much money. That's the most power that you have. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to go to John Walker.
Hi, can you hear me?
Sure, go ahead, John.
Oh, great, thanks. So my name is John Walker. I'm Vice President of the Wallwinnet Landowners Association. And in conjunction with Tony Cahill, who's the president, we would voice our concern and opposition regarding SouthCoast wind project. And we vote no, and we would vote to walk away. I think that it was brought up earlier, there has been some success in my research with the Cape May project and the Cape Wind project, where local opposition played a role in having those projects canceled. And I'd love to hear comments from Will, if possible, when I finish, about the local opposition and its impact on to the previous person who was just speaking, delaying them, and especially given the new administration. I think that there is a window here, but I'd like to also inform this forum of our efforts to raise awareness with other civic league members on the island. Unfortunately, I don't think homeowners are aware of the size and scope of these projects and the negative impacts it's going to have on Nantucket, some of them permanent. For example, I don't think that a lot of people were aware of this meeting, although I know the town has been good in trying to get the word out. But I recently sent a letter to the 25 presidents of the Homeowners Association with links to the grassroots organization Act for Whales and Keep Nantucket Wild, including the town website. And these are a tremendous resource of information to remain current on all the issues related to these offshore projects. And I've gotten some great feedback and support. And I would just encourage the select board to join in opposition to the project and vote no. I think you would probably find that, if a vote was put out, that you would, to the taxpayers, that you would have a similar response. So I would just also say, without decommissioning, I think that it's incredibly harmful to Nantucket if there's no decommissioning money, because at some point, to points made earlier, these things are going to have to come down. But I would just ask if Will could respond with any feedback in terms of the success that Cape May or Cape Wind had with the local opposition.
Okay. Before Will speaks, I just want to, the use of the phrase walk away, I just want to be clear the audience understands walking away does not stop the wind farm, right? Walking away stops our participation in the process of evaluating the impact and securing mitigation should the project move forward. That's the definition of walk away this evening. I just don't want to lose sight of that as we go through and leave the implication that walking away somehow is going to make this not happen. Because
Understood. I just think that, Amy's point that she made earlier too about, I think there is a window, and I think we need to do everything we can and not give up in terms of trying to fight these things.
Okay, I'm going to ask Will to comment on his experience personally with both Cape May and Cape Wind.
Yeah, I would be the first person to applaud the fact that Cape May Wind never happened. I was a lawyer at the National Trust for Historic Preservation, supporting the opponents of Cape May Wind for years. I wrote amicus briefs on behalf of the preservation opponents and tribes. Every single step of the legal process resulted in an adverse decision against the preservation and conservation groups and tribes and in favor of Cape Wind. There was a long, drawn-out administrative review, several years of federal court litigation that ultimately was not successful on behalf of those who were trying to stop Cape Wind. What led to the stopping of Cape Wind was the developer didn't have financing in place, and the tax subsidies expired. I've tried to track, make some sort of causation between, or correlation between the litigation and the loss of the tax subsidies, and I've never been able to find it. So as a lawyer who participated in these legal proceedings, I cannot, as much as I would like to claim that they had something to do with Cape Wind being built, I simply cannot do that. I would not be honest to say that it did. And the same would be true for the litigation involving Ocean Wind. Ocean Wind did pull out. There were a lot of financing and supply chain challenges that were already announced in the public domain. There was a filing of an appeal of BOEM's decision. There's never been a single decision reached involving that case. In fact, right now, the parties, including Cape May County, the Department of Justice, and Ocean Wind, are discussing how to issue or how to draft an order of dismissal because the project is now moot. Greg may have something he might want to add to that, but there's simply no ability to say that the filing of the Ocean Wind appeal led to the withdrawal of that project. And I would also add that even if Ocean Wind withdraws, Ocean Wind is working actively to sell its permit to another wind developer.
Greg, did you want to add anything?
I don't have anything to add.
Okay, all right, thank you. Haley?
Yep. Haley Cook. I just have a question about the mitigation efforts, since you're asking for ideas. When we're talking about projects and funding, does it have to be directly related to the turbines? So for example, because there's blinking lights, it has to do with dark skies? Or could we simply say, well, this is a historic landmark, there's going to be negative effects, here's a good thing you could do to help us, i.e. with erosion control, we want funding for that, or we want you to help us build housing, or other things that we could take advantage of here? Or does it have to be directly resulting in like the night sky and things like that?
I'm going to ask Will, it's a great question, and I'm going to ask Will to answer it.
It's a very good question. Since we're responding to BOEM in terms of mitigation ideas, there needs to be some sort of nexus between historic preservation. The good thing about the entire island or islands of Nantucket, including Tuckernutt and Muskeget, is that you also have the opportunity to use mitigation funding for coastal resiliency projects, right? Because that directly impacts your ability to preserve the islands themselves. And that was one of the features of the Good Neighbor Agreement in Vineyard Wind that tied to historic preservation. So purposes of what BOEM is asking for, your ideas are appropriate ones.
Okay, great, thank you. That clarifies that. And I would say then, as a member of the public, one suggestion I would have would be to focus on erosion control in this mitigation. I'm not sure I have specifics on that, with the coastal resilience plan, but there are a lot of options. So that's something that I would say, if we have an opportunity to take advantage of that and we can have some help with that, we could use it. Thank you.
Thanks, Haley. Katrina Gerwitz? Sorry if I'm butchering your name.
Thank you. No worries. Katrina Hamilton Gewers. I am a sailor and come to Nantucket regularly, so I speak as an outsider, but also one who's already gone through the mitigation process and was a consulting party with other wind farms. And I would just say, Nantucket, get your, strap your boots on and get ready. When they offer you $150,000, they're going to tell you that's to put up some trees so you don't see them. It's going to ruin your view anyway. There's already realtors on Block Island who are being public about stating that they have customers asking that there's not a turbine view. So this is going to affect rental, as other people said, rental and historic values on the entire historic island, on rental properties, housing values, entertainment, destination weddings, everything. In the mitigation, if you go into it, do everything you can. This is your time to ask for anything and everything you want, to slow the process to make sure you get what you want. And that request might include a variety of things, including asking that nothing be considered for this next project until everything else between your island and the 23 miles where this next one starts be completed, so that you can see what the true effects are of the next level of what's coming. Additionally, knowing the effects on the historic island when a turbine fails, as you've already seen this past summer, including beaches closing, please consider including in your mitigation measures that the project cannot move forward until it is no longer a pilot project. As it exists today, there's not a facility large enough to test the length of the blades that are being used. The test is over the Atlantic Ocean. It's an embarrassment to our government that this is happening. And as others said, viewing these in isolation is unfortunate. But unfortunate for us is that Goliath has people who are strategic permitters, and even within one wind project, they will parse out permitting requests. If they need 5 above water substations, they're only going to ask for 1 to be permitted at a time. I just do a cautionary warning that this is something that, as a woman Charlotte previously said, you are not in a position of weakness. You are in a position of strength. You have an amazing island. You have a beautiful community, and you need to band together with your community and everybody else who's affected by this to stop offshore wind. The carbon footprint of offshore wind is arguably worse if done than left undone. This is not the solution. This is a placebo effect for people who think we have to do something. It is better to do nothing than to do something. So get involved. Go back to them and draw out this situation as long as possible. It is the only way to stop it.
Thank you. Susan Lemoy-Zarba?
Hi, this is Susan Lemoy-Zarba.
Hi, go ahead.
I'm also an outsider. However, I'm in Nantucket almost as much as I'm on the vineyard. We're recreational fishermen and boaters, and my son grew up on the vineyard, and we played every sport against Nantucket. So what I want to say is, Nantucket South Coast win. I'm saying that I hope you all vote a no on the MOA today. Nantucket cannot allow the offshore wind to destroy Nantucket's national landmark status. I don't even know if you get to keep it if you have that many wind turbines around you for 30 years. The offer that they've given you of a historic property survey, an archaeology survey, and $150,000 for mitigation process is a joke. What were you going to do? Give every resident that lives there $1? I don't understand. Nantucket needs to partner with the 6 towns of Martha's Vineyard, including the Gayhead Wampanoag tribe. Martha's Vineyard and the tribe are greatly impacted by all 10 developers, the 1,300 turbines off of both of our coasts. Lawsuits work. They've worked in other parts of the country, and they can work here. Do not go to bed with any of these developers. File lawsuits against SouthCoast Wind and the federal government. It is the perfect storm for these lawsuits to be put in place right away. The DOJ will probably not be fighting these legal matters after January 2025, and Trump vows to make and keep promises. We are the guinea pigs in this giant Ponzi scheme. Please put a stop to it and join Martha's Vineyard. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Edmund?
Hello.
Hello, go ahead.
Okay. I wanted to raise up, first of all, I think you should, more importantly, timing is really of importance here.
Sir, we're having a very hard time hearing you. There's noise in the background.
Okay. Let's see if I could get rid of the noise. I don't know if that's better now. I was saying it's about timing. You're saying you got a month and a half before BOEM is going to go ahead and make a decision. And so that doesn't give us really any time. We're sitting here having a meeting about something that's going to happen a month and a half. There's hardly any time to react to this. But one of the most important things that have really occurred over the last 6 months, and it was alluded to early on, and that is the Chevron deference decision that came out of the Supreme Court this summer, which states that an agency's interpretation is no longer valid if things are ambiguous or not known within the legislation or its regulations. What could be more ambiguous as to the impact of what this will be? So I look at it as this didn't occur with any of the prior approvals. This is something new that we could have, and that the Looper decision, which came out of the Supreme Court, gives us another bite to look at this and slow this thing down. The importance of slowing it down is that basically file a lawsuit by the time this thing has to get approved in December, and ask for an injunction so no building can go on, to have it reviewed. Well, the big thing is it's not going to be reviewed and looked at by BOEM. It's going to be looked at by the court, the district court, and then an appeal at the Court of Appeals. So it gives us a little bit of time. And so if we can gain a little bit of time and push this thing off, it really becomes, who's the administration now, but more importantly, what is the economics of the deal? Things become more and more expensive. The builders, the developers pull out of these deals. And if the economics aren't there because there's this over their head, they may have to slow this down and pull out of the deal. Because what's going to come online, LNG production and other type of things that are going to be pushed by the new and different administration. So I just think you have to take a crack at it is by filing something in the district court within the next month to go ahead and see if you can put this in play with the new Looper decision.
Okay, thank you.
And if council will want to respond to that, I'm not sure how in depth they looked at that.
Okay. So I'm hearing a preference for preserving our ability to appeal.
No, it's not an appeal. This is an attack to prevent it from going anywhere.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to go to Kathy Greeter online and then Meg at the mic.
Hi, this is Kathy Greeter calling from Nantucket, and I was just wondering, as part of the mitigation, could we possibly have some of the power from any of these windmills, some of the townspeople or the community benefit and have their electric bills reduced by this. We're not getting any benefit on our electric from them. So I was wondering if that could be part of the mitigation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll put that on the list, Kathy. Meg?
Okay. Sorry, that was a good idea. As far as lights in the water, I lived in Cisco for 3 years. There's always lights in the water. The squid boats are out from horizon to horizon. That's normal out there. My parents' house fell in the ocean. So as the ocean rises, the ocean takes. That's just what it does. I do not have Tobias's public speaking. So I say yes. I say that this is a great idea. It is providing a lot of electricity. We are not using less power out here. We have heated outdoor pools now. If we're going to keep guzzling energy, then we have to get it from somewhere. As we have global warming happening, the oceans are in fact rising and acidifying, and the water that we're not now getting, the power we're getting from Canada's dams, at some point, as we keep having droughts, we're going to lose that power source. So I say yes, let's add a power source. Thank you.
Thanks, Meg. I'm going to go to, I'm skipping the folks online, and again, just to be clear, I'm giving everyone an opportunity to speak first before I give people an opportunity to speak again. Karen Gleason online.
Thank you. Can you hear me good?
Yep, go ahead, Karen.
Thanks. You have a lot to consider. I think one of the roles of, just hear me out here for a second. One of the roles of your positions on the being on the select board is providing safety, health, and welfare to your, all of your constituents and community. I'm asking that as a select board that you consider, I have one idea and a response, mitigation response. If that's the route you choose. I'm very concerned about the term infrasound, INFRA sound. You're going from 856 feet of wind turbines out in your ocean that you can visibly see to 1,066 foot turbines between 147 and 149 turbines. So you've got a lot of blades, you got a lot of turbines, and you're only on number 2 lease. There's 9 leases out there. That's a lot of blades, a lot of square miles. I'm concerned with infrasound, how it affects the humans. I'm not even going to mention the marine because the animals, you don't want to talk about that. But your health and safety and welfare of your constituents, infrasound, it appears, does have an impact and effect on your human health, your brain, your organs, your body. I'm asking that you folks hire an expert on infrasound, a scientist that knows the impact. And you putting the cart before the horse, if you can just educate yourselves before making a final decision, whether it be mitigation or not, is the impact of infrasound on your people, because it's very concerning. And I think that you need to know that before going forward with another lease agreement. And then we don't know how many more is going to come by your way. As part of the mitigation response, you could ask that SouthCoast, if this is the route you choose, to set up a medical claim file or medical claim department, because going forward, you may find some medical claims that might be related in the future. You can't predict that right now, but it is a great possibility. So I would like for you to consider that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hi, my name's Sharon Stones. My husband and I are fairly new homeowners. It's been 3 years since we bought our house, although we haven't been able to live here for various reasons. We go back and forth, and I was clueless about the offshore wind farms and my hair's on fire right now. I came from Texas, where there are miles of windmills, but they are in areas that nobody lives. You don't see them. And I am a big fan of alternative energy. Our house in Texas, we put 37 solar panels on the roof, and it was great. We made it so our neighbors weren't looking directly at the front of our house. But I agree. I think we've got to do a major lawsuit and mitigation. I looked it up. The oldest offshore wind farm was in Denmark. The first one was built in 1991. And then the average lifespan of the blades is 20 to 30 years. One of the statistics was about a 1.5% failure rate. So I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but we were here this summer when the blades started floating up on the beach. I'm a retired nurse. My husband's a cancer doctor, specializing in blood and solid organ. And there is a lot of danger to be had with this. And I feel like with any project, there should be a cost-benefit analysis. And I think BOEM has failed us in an adequate cost-benefit analysis, because I don't know what these companies are making, how much federal funding they've gotten, who's getting the electricity at what cost, what their profit is going to be, what the...
So I'm gonna ask you to focus on the question that we have tonight, which is
So
on
putting into...
the question of mitigation.
Right, if we were to go ahead, I mean, I would put a $30 trillion price tag to cover the 30 years that those blades are going to impact our island. I mean, if Elon Musk makes a fraction of that per day, wow, I wonder what these companies are going to make. Anyway, I'm going to leave it to people with more experience.
Okay, thank you very much. Jesse Sandoli online?
Hey, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead, Jesse.
You know, one point I want to make that I think is crazy that no one has said yet tonight is that BOEM itself has disclosed that even if every single turbine on the East Coast were to be built out, not just the 1,300 off Nantucket, the thousands and thousands of others that are planning to be built on the entire East Coast, that it would have a negligible impact on climate change. So if we want to talk about a cost-benefit analysis or any kind of benefit analysis with this project, everybody needs to know that these projects are not going to have a single impact on climate change, and that is per the government. That is not per me
Jesse?
or anybody else. So I think
Jesse,
that's really important to know. I'm going to make that point, and then I'm going to move on. The fact that we're sitting here and talking about future mitigations is absolutely insane. We are not in a position of weakness, as several speakers before have said. The tide has massively changed on this, whether you like Trump or not. They are saying that they are going to shut down these projects. We are in a position of strength. This is ridiculous. It is time to turn the tide on this. Look at what's happened so far to our island. This is the beginning of the end if we don't act now. We have over 155 businesses, thousands of signatures asking you guys to do something. When are you going to do something? Vote no. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jesse. Emily, did you want to speak? Emily's going to come up to the mic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Emily Molden. First of all, thank you to the town for holding this forum. I think that it's clearly a challenging process, and seeing the decision tree as it was presented to us definitely leaves you scratching your head a little bit. But as far as I can tell, I can't come up with any positive reasons for walking away at this point in this 106 permitting process. I think the town should remain engaged and respond at this point. I think we probably all would agree that we need to anticipate some future either blade failure or other failure that could result in some unexpected scenario. I appreciate that the town has up to this point included in their comments concerns around impacts to our waters and our beaches, and been trying to make that nexus clear that our waters and our beaches are an important part of our National Historic Landmark designation. And I think that the town should continue to try to push for more adequate consideration and contingencies around potential future impacts like what we have seen this past summer. And at the same time, trying to retain as much as possible all opportunities for future participation and even challenge of the permitting process. The impacts to our waters and beaches certainly could be to some extent minimized and mitigated by better conditions and requirements. And so I do think that it's really important for us to continue to try to push for those in every aspect of the permitting process for these projects. And then in addition to some of the other suggestions that you've heard, would be very supportive of trying to push for appropriately funding future decommissioning as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Emily. I'm going to go to Elizabeth Prince online.
Yes, hi. My name is Elizabeth Prince, and I come from Newport, Rhode Island, where the Preservation Society has also filed a suit because of the historic nature of our viewshed. What I would like to suggest is that we're now closing in at the end of the year. Could you do something to stall? Because I think the new administration is going to put some new people, hopefully Patricia Morgan, in charge of the Office of Bureau Management, which I think has that organization has done us terrible harm to you, to Nantucket, to everybody else. You know, these goddamn windows are a boondoggle. They don't help anything. So stand fast, stall, 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 because I think the new administration, I never voted for this guy, but I tell you, if he's gonna fix this, I'm for him. So stall until you get a new Bureau of Ocean Management, and we can get rid of this damn windows, offshore windows, any kind of windows. Thank you.
Thank you. Andy Timmerman online.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead. I think two people were unmuted at the same time.
Andy Timmerman.
I'm gonna have Andy speak, and we just need to reset the timer. Hang on one second. Okay, go ahead, Andy.
Thank you. I live for the last 10 years on Nonantum on Surfside. Enjoy the beach with my family for 10 summers in a row, and maybe more than that. And now that view, and obviously what happened last summer with a blade decomposition blowing up without even any high winds, I don't believe. And first of all, I'd like to note that it's a hard no by me. Also, if Brooke isn't willing to mitigate or move forward with this, she should probably resign. We have plenty of people, and if I have 200 no's, I might have one yes that's for this, which I think is absurd. I don't know why you'd live on Nantucket and want to approve of something like a wind farm off of our shores. But my big concern immediately is if we have a 50 or 60 mile an hour storm that hits that beach, how many blades are going to blow off the turbines? And has anyone ever given us, structural evidence that we're not going to have any blades washing ashore, like 20 or 30 blades?
Mr. Timmerman, the topic of discussion tonight is the proposal by BOEM for mitigation and to
Yes.
get community feedback on whether or not we should respond to that proposal, and if we respond, what mitigation are we asking for?
Complete
Would you like
stop,
to-
complete stop, mitigation to stop,
Okay,
to stop it and dismantle it and take it away, the whole thing. I mean,
okay,
period. Thank you for the time.
okay, thank you, Mr. Timmerman. Margaret Young online? And
Hi, yes, thank you. And thank you to the town for having a public forum to decide this. I have a couple of comments. One is from the conversation tonight, it sounds like you have a couple of work streams that the town needs to consider. And I think those work streams that you need to put in a parking lot and address are clearly strategies to delay and stop the project. And I do think that there is a lot that the town could do to do that. In terms of your mitigation plan, I would just like to add support for some of the previous comments. I think you need to put together the strongest financial ask in terms of mitigation. I think there is no way to know how much this is going to destroy the landscape of Nantucket. I think you have a unique opportunity, given that the entire island is considered a historic monument. Decommissioning is going to cost upwards of, I don't even know, $500 million. In terms of damage from the wind farms and the blade failure, since that's already happened, and there's an example of it happening, I believe the stats on blade failure are 0.01 to 0.05 blade failures. So this debris washing up on the beaches is going to happen at least annually. And I think the town really needs to ask for a lot of money to handle that in terms of loss of business, loss of tourism, cleanup of the beaches. I was also going to bring up the point of EMF and how that damages health and concerns around that and damages tourism. I think you have an opportunity, if you are going to move forward with the mitigation plan, to really outline what the island needs. And I think it's a lot of money, and I think you have an opportunity to put it forth. And I think you should take that opportunity. I also would like to say you need to put some work streams in place to handle the objections of the project itself that are being so strongly brought up here. I think, well, I'll make one more comment since I have 30 seconds, or maybe I don't.
You do.
I also think that there is a strategy that you could employ, which is to refuse to respond to the mitigation plan, write a letter detailing why you're refusing, because I don't have any confidence that any mitigation plan that's reasonable will be approved or provided, and use that as a strategy to try to stop the projects.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your input.
Can I just quick follow up?
Yeah.
We have asked if people are interested in commenting, there's online, there's a lot of different state and federal people you can write to and put your complaints to them. They don't get very many, so if you do send it, it's meaningful. Number one. Number two, we've asked people who have impacts to write down their economic impact. There's a form there. Even if it's an impact you think it's going to be impacting you in the future. And I've asked, and last time there was like 7 or 8 people. The more people that do that, that gives us, we've got someone hired to help us put those numbers together. That gives us the ability to put that type of argument together. And so, I think if people want to help the situation, that's one way that they can do that. And I hope that everyone that's listening tonight and that's here has, and is showing this concern is doing that, because that will help us.
Jason?
Grazie, Nantucket Current. A number of people have alluded to this throughout the night tonight, but I think
hopefully asking through you to our law firm, Cultural Heritage Partners, what is the impact of the new administration coming in? And if they do make good on their pledge to stop offshore wind on day one, does that change Cultural Heritage's strategy and recommendations to the town on what we do right now with respect to this process 106? And how does that change what we should be doing if that pledge is indeed, what that incoming administration is going to do? Thank you.
Okay, so first of all, this decision that's before us is a now thing. It's not a January thing, it's now. We have to respond to Boehm imminently. So if we choose not to, the decision tree shows us that it does limit our ability to appeal the mitigation, the extent of mitigation that we finally get if we're not responding. So that's where we are today. Jason, you asked me this question the day after the election.
Didn't get a response.
Because I think it is probably a little unfair to ask a municipal representative to speculate on what's going to happen in federal policy based on campaign promises.
That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking our attorneys who are representing us and negotiating on our behalf if that impacts what the strategy is for the town. I think that's a fair question.
Will, do you want to try to address that?
I'll let Greg weigh in on the political question, but to Chairperson Moore's comment, we're facing a permit being issued on December 20th. That will be before any change of the administration takes place. So whatever happens after a new administration's been sworn in will be after the fact, and there will be an existing permit if Boehm holds to its current timetable.
Correct. Well, that's what I think everyone here is asking you. Is there a strategy which you can delay that or postpone that or delay that? That's the question.
Jason, we're not going to do a back and forth with the
I'm
lawyer,
happy to add.
okay? It's been a really great, reasonable dialogue to date, so let's try to keep it that way. I think the process is in place. We're being asked to respond to the process. That's what we're here for tonight. Whether there's other legal strategies involved, I think is not a conversation we're going to have this evening. So, okay, so everyone who has their hand up or is at the mic has spoken already. This was meant to be 2 hours. We're at 2 hours and 15 minutes. I have a gentleman standing up who hasn't spoken, so I'm going to let him go. And then I'm going to have a strategy for bringing this to a close. So,
hello.
not necessarily not allowing people to speak, but a strategy to get us home.
Spencer Goldsmith, just a couple of comments here. In listening to the mitigation recommendations, it seems like a tremendous amount of effort is put into putting dollars and cents to it. I think with what this island is facing, dollars and cents can't measure this. The mitigation has to be focused on reduction of impact, not dollars and cents. How can we reduce the impact so that they don't proceed with these crazy plans of 1,000-foot windmills and the like? So to me, the focus for mitigation needs to be on that. And with how we respond, it seems that if we do respond, that we can delay it if we have the opportunity to appeal. Okay. So I would stay involved in the process.
So, Will gave me a tutorial on these terms. Mitigation is the compensation that it's compensation for harm accepted by the permitting authority, right? So they define a harm and then they say, we're going to mitigate it by doing the following things. And And now reduction will help me, we had this conversation. There's a difference between mitigation and, what was the other term?
Minimization.
Minimization, thank
Yeah.
you. So I'm
So,
going to have
yeah,
Will
just-
give us a quick primer on that.
No, that's a good job. So 3 words are important in the Section 106 process, which is what brings us here tonight. Avoidance means no impact. We've been asking for that. Minimization of adverse effects, to lower them, make them less harmful. We've been asking for that. The question before us tonight by Boehm is, what mitigation proposals would be acceptable or good ideas or ways to offset adverse effects that will not be avoided? That is the purpose of mitigation. It's very much akin to wetlands mitigation, when a developer fills in wetlands and restores wetlands in another part of a jurisdiction or another part of the state. The idea is offset adverse effects are going to occur.
Wait, excuse me, ma'am. Excuse me, ma'am. Excuse me, ma'am. Ma'am, that's not our process in public meetings in Nantucket. Okay? Thank you. I realize you're upset, but I'm just going to ask you. And part of the reason for that is that the people online can't hear you when you speak from a seat.
Very good.
Okay. So that's why we do it the way we do it. Okay? Okay. So I have a few more hands up online. Oh, boy. I know. I'm going to have Matt speak at the mic, and then I'm going to think about my meeting management strategy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Matt Haffenreffer. So the way that I think about this problem is that all energy has impacts: environmental, viewshed, economic, and we're being given an opportunity to help define the way that we deal with consequences of that. And to walk away from an opportunity to shape that limits any future hope we have to make sure it's effective, define the way that we want to see those impacts cared for, mitigated, minimized. So what I would push for is to make sure that we do stay in so we have a chance to impact the conversation and define those things ourselves by terms that impact us here, so that we're not defining them at a federal level where they're really removed from understanding the community and the island.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, so I have 2 new names online. I'm going to take those. Carl Van Wormerdam, sort of?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Carl Van Wormerdam.
Oh,
I'll make it short.
Okay.
The beauty of Nantucket is priceless. Boehm has given an offer. What the other gentleman said is gaslighting, basically. They're not negotiating in good faith. And Nantucket shouldn't either. So a $30 trillion mitigation, that seems reasonable. I mean, they're not negotiating. I mean, that it's not like it's like you don't have a choice. So make a statement. Just make a statement. They've made a statement, which is ridiculous, and nobody wants these. Nobody wants them at all. It's very obvious now that you can see them. So I would hit the ball right back at them. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Constance Gee online, and then I'm going to take the hands that are up and the people that are at the mic, and then we're going to call it an evening. So,
yes.
Go ahead.
Hi. I just have a question. I know that the law firm Cultural Heritage Partners has filed a lawsuit for Newport Preservation Society over the damage to the Cliff Walk view shed. Why are they discouraging Nantucket on filing another suit? is my first question. And I have one other quick question that they can answer after that, please.
Will's going to go ahead and answer your first question.
That's an easy question to answer because neither Boehm nor Orsted would respond in any meaningful way to the mitigation counter proposals by the Preservation Society of Newport County and the Southeast Lighthouse Foundation on Block Island. We're at an earlier point here in the SouthCoast process.
Yeah, so it's a matter of where we are in the process. We are at the stage of having a proposal and deciding whether to respond and what to respond to. And should there be no response from either the developer or Boehm with regard to what we demand, then we would be at this point in time, Newport is at this time. Is that right, Will?
And the Revolution Wind and South Fork Wind projects were permitted earlier. So they have reached the end of the process.
Right, so they're farther along in the process. Pete, did you
Thank
want
you.
to?
Wait, I have one question.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, follow up.
Yeah, I just want to follow up. I wanted to ask, how does Cultural Heritage Partners, how are they paid? I thought I understood it was that they received a percentage of whatever settlement was made with the companies. Is that true? And do you think that that has any bearing at all on that? They seem to be pushing more for a settlement than to walk away.
I'm not going to actually respond to the compensation scheme tonight on that. I will tell you that historically, CHP was the compensation came from the settlement of the Good Neighbor Agreement. As we proceed with other wind farms, we have a different compensation methodology for matters related to these future wind farms. So there's reasons I can't talk about the details of that, and I'm sorry, it's just is what it is for now, but hopefully at some point in time we'll be able to be clearer on that. Okay. Pete?
Hello, everybody. Appreciate everybody putting up.
Just state your full name.
My name is Pete Kaiser. I've been a waterman around Nantucket for 40 years, diving, flying, running a boat. Anyway, I just want to let everybody know a few things. One, there is no, as far as the marine ecology, by all this construction that's going on out here, there's absolutely no advantage for it. If anything, along that 20 to 30 fathom edge, going the whole from Long Island down through here, where these things are based, there's been an amazing change in the amount of bait. This is a historical highway. We have mackerel, herring.
So Pete,
So anyway, I'm going to say
I appreciate
that
your perspective, but it's out of the scope of
I
tonight's meeting.
feel like we should just walk away from this mitigation. 150 grand is a joke, as it's been commented. But if we accept it, it appears that we're for this, for this whole windmill farm. And I believe the vast majority of the watermen and ladies around Nantucket are against this.
Okay.
So I just want to say it's not going to benefit any of us, but I hate the fact that people say, oh, Nantucket's for it. They took the money. I want it on record that myself, to my kids and grandkids, that I am totally against this because it definitely has a negative impact on the marine ecology.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Pete. Just to be clear, the decision the board has to make is not whether to accept the mitigation. It is, do we respond to the offer by saying it's inadequate and demanding more? It is not about agreeing to take the mitigation. So that's what not responding is accepting. It's kind of like town meeting with a negative. Not responding to the offer means that will be what we get, because that's what Boehm has offered.
But how do we put the message across?
We respond saying it's inadequate, and we make much larger demands. And then if we're not happy with what BOEM comes through with after that, we preserve our right to appeal the approval.
Well, then our demand should be astronomical to a point.
So that's what we're
because
asking for.
What we're
What-
trying to say is, there is no price for a live ocean.
Okay,
There is consequences to a dead ocean, and that's the route we're going to be taking if we allow all of this industrial action to happen.
okay. So I
With the
just,
whales and everything else.
yep, just want to make sure people understand what our options are. It's a bit of a double negative, actually. It's a little bit like a negative recommendation for the Finance Committee on a town meeting warrant article. What's up and what's down. But in this case, Pete, I don't want to get in a back and forth.
I
Yeah.
gotta
So-
say it. There is no price to make it a dead ocean.
Okay,
That is,
Okay.
it's off.
So
There
if-
is no, so make it
Okay.
astronomical, gazillions of dollars.
okay,
But make it noted that we're not being bought out,
okay.
all right?
All right, thanks, Pete.
I mean, I take it real serious.
I gotcha. I do. Okay. All right. The last person that I had online when I said that was the last person was a Richard McCready. And I'm going to take him, and then I'm going to let people have their second comments, and then that's it for the night. So go ahead, Mr. McCready, when you're unmuted. So Mr. Smith,
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. McCready.
Okay, great. I live out by Cisco, and I've listened to everything that's been said. A lot of great points that have been made tonight. The one thing that I would say, and I thought the question about the law firm was a great question about how they get paid. I personally think this is not an either or. It's not as binary as it's been presented. I think you go back with a very aggressive mitigation request. And that request ought to have part of its aim should be to put, as in any litigation, a lot of onus on the other party to put forward information, reports, studies, whatever. Because to me, I think delaying any permitting, any outcome as much as possible, anything that would have this go forward is the best strategy for the short term, right? Because the main thing that I hear from everybody tonight is nobody wants this. Nobody wants this. And so the best thing that you can do for the short term is find every way you can delay this. And to me, I'm in commercial real estate. I would say that the best strategy is to get a very aggressive litigation firm, try to get injunctive relief to stop not only Vineyard Wind, but anything that says you can do any of this until there's been years of evidence that there's no further blade debris problems in the ocean, no further. The burden of proof, to me, is in the wrong place. It should be on the wind companies because there have been problems and there is debris coming up on the beach. And so at this point, it should be time out. Everything stops until you prove that this is safe, until you prove that there's no, impairment to the fishery and to the marine wildlife and to, the visual impact to the island. I've never understood why when they haven't lived up to their side of the agreement. I'm talking about Vineyard Wind right now.
Well, sir, we're
But
not talking about Vineyard Wind tonight. Okay?
I get it. But the point is, it's being aggressive. It's being aggressive from a litigation perspective and not looking for ways to settle, looking for ways to stop and delay. Okay. And I don't want somebody who's mainly getting paid if there's a settlement negotiating on our behalf. I think that the main thing we want is to stop this from going forward. And all I can say is I'm not a Trump supporter. Other people in the room may be, but he is a master at delaying things, and look at what it's done for him. And that's what I think in this case, that should be the primary goal right now.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so Val?
Yeah, I have two questions.
Okay.
One wasn't answered from earlier that Veronica brought up. How how the level of impact affects the mitigations required? That's the first question, and that would be for Will, I guess. And then my second question is, I hear your frustration, I hear our frustration. The federal government has failed to look at this cumulatively, but we cannot. And I just want to know, is there a way we can have a meeting before we get to the point where we're negotiating, like, and discuss all of this together as a community? So in other words, I know we've gotten off topic a little bit today, but that's because there's so much to say and the scope is so narrow. Can we have a general public meeting where we can all gather and give input for things that are coming down the road? Those are my two questions.
Okay, so we'll take the second question under advisement, and Will's going to answer the first question.
So the first question is a good one. How does the level of adversity affect the mitigation required? There's no requirement under federal law, which is a gap in our federal law and regulations. The best I can offer you is in the Section 106 regulations is that mitigation is supposed to offset adverse effects. So we argue for proportionality based on the level of harm, but there is no legal requirement that there be this direct correlation.
Just on that note, so if something is major versus moderate to minor, there's no...
Yeah. So I'm not saying I don't agree that there ought to be, but what you're referencing are classifications that have been identified through the NEPA process, which is a wholly different process than the Section 106 process that does not make those levels of determination. I don't have another way to answer it.
So why don't, rather than going back and forth tonight, I think I understand your question, and why don't we get a written response and we'll put it up? Because there's some...
It just begs the question, why do they make categories and then...
So it's
yeah.
what Will is saying is it's
I
a
know.
different assessment process than the one we're allowed to comment on, and that we're requesting mitigation on, is what I'm hearing.
The NEPA process was designed by Congress in the mid-60s to help inform the American public about the effects of impacts to the environment, the human environment. And so that's why there are these classifications in there that go into the environmental impact statement. So it provides a level of information, but that doesn't link through regulation to a mitigation requirement. Mitigation isn't required by NEPA. It's not even required by Section 106. Avoidance or minimization or mitigation are appropriate outcomes under the plain letter or language of the National Historic Preservation Act. And it does not distinguish between levels of harm.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. Okay, Bruce, can we try to keep it brief?
Madam Chair, I have to leave, Bruce.
Okay, all right. I'm going to ask everybody to be brief because the board is running out of time. Go ahead, Bruce.
Thank you. The bottom line is, I think the feeling is the offer is inadequate, and I'd like to make 3 quick suggestions on mitigation issues that were already on the table. The painting of the above sea elements of these turbines a specific color is not as effective as it intended. It's not helping, and I invite the folks to come down to Nantucket, where we live, and take a look. And you'll be able to see them brightly glowing in the morning sun and as the sun sets. As far as the ADLS system, the implementation, it's obviously a critical item. It's it's been now 5 months into the system. It's clearly not working. I think we should ask and actually insist that the system should be fully operational prior to commissioning operations of the turbines, with no easing of such a requirement due to unspecified operational issues as we're experiencing now. We have no idea what's holding it up. The other thing is, we've had a blade failure, and this may be a good opportunity to ask that we be provided with some fine-toothed beach raking machines with a tractor or two and an annual maintenance fund sufficient to help us maintain this equipment, because those beaches still need to be combed and raked. So I think those are some things that you might consider asking for. And there was a comment recently about, oh, they're going to be 40 miles out and you won't be able to see them after 40 miles. That's a misnomer, folks, because that measurement is as if you were standing at sea level. For every foot you go above sea level, you can see about a half to 3/4 of a mile further out. So if you're in Nantucket and you're at 23 feet, that's a lot of distance added to the visibility of these things, especially if they're almost 1,100 feet tall. So I don't want that to make it seem like, oh, it's okay, they're 40 miles away. They're going to be pretty visible. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Cliff Carroll, please kindly keep it brief.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick note, just so you know, anybody that's been on Zoom tonight has not had the advantage of the time clock. So I apologize for going over earlier. A couple quick notes. The Nantucket Land Bank paid $26 million for the piece of property the other day, and their quote was, "The acquisition will provide the island community with a new public beach in perpetuity." They paid $26 million for 1 acre
Mr.
parcel.
Carroll?
I know, I
Mr.
understand this, ma'am. I'm going to my point, please. This is part of the mitigation. That was to protect a 1 acre parcel of property. We're talking about protecting the entire south coast of Nantucket, which is approximately $26 million. The point of this being, the $150,000 per week that was offered, the reason things are still coming up on the beach, and this goes to the next project, is because from what I understand, a large chunk of the blade is still in the water. And that's why debris keeps coming up on the beach. We should have a penalty in there for every day that a blade remains in our seabed, which will continue to destroy our beaches. So all I'm doing is suggesting in your mitigation a penalty for leaving the entire blade or part of the blade or a substantial part of the blade on the beach. That was that point. We have a new Interior Department on January 20th. I'm not sure, Mrs. Gee brought up a great question on the compensation for the law firm, but what I would suggest to the town of Nantucket is that we hire or take some of the funds that have been set aside for legal and maybe perhaps spend it on a lobbyist that can get us direct contact into the next administration's Interior Department and get some of our questions answered. I encourage the board to preserve their right to appeal and a lawsuit. As Mr. Cook said, they've come back later at a later point and have the ability to sue. I would not make the agreement assignable in any way, because there are already a couple of companies down the road. I think that the move that the Nantucket board has, which would be a third option, would to be request an extension based on the fact that the Bohm's 106 study is incomplete and inadequate. For instance, they did not address the oil spill fatality and what a spill would affect or how it would affect your historic properties along the shoreline, your shellfish beds, your downtown yacht basin. I think that it's a great possibility for a third option, and that is to request an extension. What is the hurry? Why are we on their time frame? And I do encourage perhaps a lobbyist or someone reach out directly to the new administration and have some discussions on these issues that are not being addressed. And I agree with the fact that we should become much more aggressive. The Cape Wind was a
Hey,
17-year fight.
Mr. Carroll, that's your 3 minutes. I'm not sure why.
Okay, I didn't have a clock,
up.
so I apologize.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, sure. Amy DeCibio?
Hi, thank you. I have a question and then just a very quick statement. I'll be brief. I know we're saying that we only have 4 weeks. We have to make a quick decision here. I guess this is being directed at Mr. Cook. When did we enter the blue triangle phase of all of this? That's my question. Should I wait for that answer and then make my?
He's
Happy
approaching.
to answer it.
When I'm talking, thanks, sorry.
Yeah, the memorandum of agreement was circulated within the last couple of months. There was no dollar amount attached to it. We kept objecting to the inadequacy of the mitigation. And it was only recently that BOEM has put forth a dollar figure for you to consider in terms of whether the substance of the mitigation is adequate as well as the dollar amount.
And your last comment?
Yeah, okay, and I'm not sure what only recently means, but it would have been great if we'd had more time on this. The second thing I just wanted to say quickly is this type of format, I know people have reservations, they wish they had more time, et cetera, and I know that's hard with a lot of people speaking, but there is a lot of benefit to this, and I hope that you are hearing the community here. What is sad is that all of the 5 projects that fall under the Good Neighbor Agreement have not allowed us to have this type of discussion. And so we're seeing one being built now, and we have 4 more coming. There'll be 350 turbines out there that we will not be able to talk about. So that's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay. Veronica?
Hi, sorry, thank you. It took me a second to unmute. I just wanted to respond to Will Cook's answer regarding the degree of adverse effect. I think it plays a more significant role than he is willing to admit in this meeting, and it's almost upsetting. The draft environmental impact statement for SouthCoast Wind contains back and forth between cultural heritage partners and BOEM about the level of adverse effect. The BOEM says, because our National Historic Landmark status is not negatively impacted, is not at risk, we're not at risk at not being one, it is not major. And if we were at risk, it would be major, and therefore it's moderate. This is significant because the New England Wind Project has a major adverse effect on our cultural historic landmark. And I think that's something really important that needs to be understood by all of the parties having these behind the scenes executive session discussions. They need to understand that. We might have given up something very valuable, and we likely have a Section 110F claim both on New England Wind and SouthCoast Wind. And it's really problematic because the first time the cumulative visual analysis was shown was during the New England Wind permitting, for which all Nantucket parties were instructed not to comment on because of the Good Neighbor Agreement. There's just one letter from Cultural Heritage Partners saying, yeah, we're good with this. Then when the record of decision comes out, they launch major adverse effect. That was a big problem to be left out of the process. I don't know the answer for whether you should stay in this process or not. I just think that the town needs to do whatever it can to stop this project and to stop anything further after Vineyard Wind. The FEIS for this project is inadequate. One thing you could do is demand further work and demand a supplemental environmental impact statement be prepared. Another thing that you could do is ask for all future projects to be stopped until we learn from the current projects. ADLS is unproven. Even South Fork Wind, that is fully operational west of Martha's Vineyard, does not have its ADLS yet. It's not coming anytime soon. don't let them build anything else until they can show us it works offshore. The issues outlined in the National Academy of
Okay,
Sciences.
Veronica, that's it for your 3 minutes. As a follow-up, I'm going to encourage anyone who has further comments or suggestions with regard to the conversation we've had tonight are free to email. Libby, what email address should we use?
They could probably just use townadministration@nantucket-ma.gov.
Townadministration@nantucket-ma.gov. If you go home, you think, you talk to.
Sorry, I just changed my mind. Communications at nantucket-ma.gov.
Okay, correction, communications at we're all a little tired, nantucket-ma.gov. Sorry, Haley. So if you go home, you think, you talk with other people, you have other ideas, remember, the conversation tonight is our decision points for this board imminently are, do we respond to the mitigation offer that's been made by BOEM that was outlined in this presentation that everybody can find in the packet or by watching the video, which is the $150,000 for 2 studies that we didn't ask for, just to be clear. Should we not respond, our attorneys have advised that that will limit our ability, our windows for appeal in the future. And so should we respond, should we choose to respond, what mitigation is the community think we should ask for? Because we really want to be as comprehensive as possible about what we can ask for. And then we'll move along in that decision tree after this stage of the process. And I want to thank everyone from the community for, we're not taking any more public comment. No, we're done. You can email the question. We'll do our best to answer them. We're 50 minutes over time. Well, we need answers. We need, in the next few days. I'll answer that question. So in the next day or two, the board's going to have to make a decision imminently. So on that note, I want to thank everyone for their participation tonight. I appreciate everyone's compliance with the 3-minute timeline, and that we gave everybody an opportunity to speak. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Okay, so that's a motion from Malcolm. Second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thanks, everyone. Really appreciate your participation.
Thanks for coming tonight.
There you go. There you go. You can recycle this. Dude, you do.